7 p.m. to 6 a.m. Richie settled into his truck for another overnight haul, same as he had done nearly every night for the past 20 years. Double trailer hitched to the back, 120,000 pounds of steel and rubber set to roar down the highway until dawn's first light. As he pulled out of the depot and onto I-95, the sun hung low on the horizon, sky awash in blazing oranges and pinks. It reminded Richie of childhood summers spent at the beach with his brother, racing breathlessly to the pier each evening, desperate to catch those last fleeting moments before the sun dipped below the waves. His brother always won those races. Richie couldn't watch the sunset directly, not with his eyes fixed on the road ahead, but the fading light painted the sky in an amateur's strokes, the missing sun evident only by the brilliant canvas it left behind. That first easy hour, before the night pressed in and the long miles began to take their toll, Richie drank in those colors and let his mind drift to simpler times. By 8:30, pastels had surrendered to the encroaching blue of night. Darkness crept in, narrowing Richie's world to the few hundred feet illuminated by his headlights. A familiar view after so many years. The loneliness no longer ate at him the way it once had. You grow accustomed to anything given enough time, even the solitude of an empty highway. Easing into a curve, he noted the battered sign, 45 miles per hour trucks. The pictogram below left no ambiguity, a semi tipped precariously on its side. Too many good men lost to carelessness over the years. Richie remembered each one. He rolled through the turn at an easy 35. No sense taking risks, not out here alone with 60 tons at his back. The years had worn away any youthful recklessness, and there was no one waiting at home to rush back to. No anxious wife or gaggle of kids counting the hours until Daddy returned. Just Richie and the truck and the corporate overlords who cared more about a missed delivery than a mangled driver. He'd made his peace with that long ago. As the clock ticked over to 9 o'clock, the last of the deep blue faded to black. Crossing into Pennsylvania, the highway opened up, city lights falling away to unbroken farmland. Out here, away from the light pollution, the stars spread across the sky in glittering profusion. More than Richie could hope to count in a lifetime of nights like this one. Looking up risked sending the truck careening off the road, but staring straight ahead the heavens seemed close enough to touch, diamonds strewn across black velvet. The beauty faded as the night wore on and exhaustion crept in. By 10 p.m., Richie's eyes were gritty and the wheel felt heavy in his hands. He blinked hard against the urge to drift, and a flash of movement in the headlights snapped him to full alertness. At the edge of the road, a mangled corpse stared back with glassy eyes. Even at 67 miles per hour, the deer's dead gaze burned itself into Richie's mind. He'd seen roadkill before, of course. You couldn't drive the night roads without glimpsing the occasional unlucky animal who'd met a grill at high speed. But something in those eyes, dull, empty, yet horribly aware, burrowed under Richie's skin. Their silent entreaty echoed in his head long after the broken body disappeared into the night behind him. "Kill me." Richie cranked the radio, searching for distraction in the old familiar tunes. Jagger and Richards, Clapton, gods of his youth, now nothing more than voices keeping him company on the endless blacktop. But after a few songs, the driving rhythms lapsed into unsettling stillness. When the DJs returned, it was with macabre tales of stairways in the deep woods and paranormal encounters best left unwitnessed. Grinding his teeth in frustration, Richie scanned for something, anything, to fill the heavy silence. Static swallowed most of the stations at this hour. He was about to shut the damn thing off and suffer in silence when a low murmur crept from the speakers. Barely audible at first, almost lost beneath the road noise. Then, rising slowly, the whispered voice resolved into sickening clarity. "Kill me, kill me, kill me." Not human, that voice. A guttural, bloody rasp torn from the throat of a dying animal. Richie punched the power button, hands shaking as blessed quiet descended. Jesus, maybe he was losing it out here. Just another burned-out trucker spinning ghost stories to keep himself awake. "Eyes on the road. You're okay. Nothing out here but you and the truck." The words sounded thin in the confines of the cab. unsteady, but Richie clung to them like a talisman against the night, against his own spiraling thoughts. 2 a.m. now, the witching hour. All the terrors and creeping shadows given free rein while sensible folk slept snug in their beds. Out here, Richie was a lone island of life in an ocean of darkness. The stars still stretched overhead, but some trick of the night robbed them of their earlier wonder. They glared down harsh and pitiless, silver needles pricking holes in the black. No source of comfort, but a cold conspiracy with the void. The scrape of static snatched him back from the teetering edge of exhaustion. Murmured voices bled through the white noise, pitching up and down in fevered conversation. A half-familiar cadence, a word here and there, each snapping against Richie's fraying nerves like a whip crack. He fumbled for the dial, desperate for solid ground, trying to outrun his own fragmenting thoughts. His hand trembled on the radio, the steering wheel, the gear shift, fatigue and dread drowning his reason. Fight it, he chanted in his head. You're almost there. Stay awake. Stay sane. Stay alive. The digital display ticked over to 4:13 a.m. as the horror reached its crescendo. A howling scream blasted from the speakers, all flensed hide and splintered bone. It surrounded and buffeted him until the boundaries between skull and sky dissolved, until all the world was blood and noise and the glaring headlights reflecting off wet, staring eyes at the highway's edge. A slaughtered calf, splayed and steaming on the asphalt. Another hallucination. It had to be, but those eyes, those terrible, accusing eyes. Richie couldn't look away as they filled his view and bored into his soul. Not pleading this time, but commanding. Kill me, kill me, kill me. The litany crashed around him. Inside him, a cacophony in the thundering meat of his heart. He wrenched the wheel to the right, nearly too late to avoid the twisted remains. The truck shuddered and swayed, trailer swinging wildly, tires screaming. Then, with a sickening lurch and a shriek of rending metal, the world tilted and gravity failed. Richie had one final instant of clarity, an image of dawn's light gleaming through the spider-webbed windshield as the earth rushed up to meet him, before the shattering glass and the shrieking steel and the bloody, screaming voices swallowed him whole. Then nothing but a yawning black silence that had no bottom and no end. He floated for a time in that chasm, a ghost untethered. But slowly the void receded, pried back by a nagging discomfort. Some sense or memory of self intruding on the perfect nothingness. A steady electronic beep, muffled voices drifting in and out. He cracked an eye open, suddenly aware of possessing such a thing. The sharp tang of antiseptic. A hospital his sluggish brain supplied. But it felt wrong, flat, like a half-remembered dream. His eyes couldn't quite focus, sliding off the edges of things as if the world were a poorly developed photograph. A door opened, rubber soles squeaking on linoleum. Still out cold, someone murmured. A figure in blue scrubs moved into Richie's swimming field of vision. It leaned over him, looking but not seeing, like he was part of the furniture, just another broken thing occupying this sterile, anonymous room. The figure busied itself around the bed, attending to tubes and wires that disappeared beneath the sheets. Then, with a swiftness that sent panic sparking along Richie's nerves, it seized a bag hanging on a metal stand. He felt a cold rush and a tugging in his groin as the nurse emptied his catheter. His lips moved soundlessly, tongue thick and useless, trying to make some sense of this half-life. The nurse turned back to him, tilting her head as if perplexed. Listening. Get up, he screamed inside his head. Say something. Do something. Anything to prove he was more than dead meat waiting for disposal. But his paralyzed flesh refused to obey. After a long moment, the nurse shrugged and turned away. Richie could only watch in silent despair as she walked out, taking the light with her, taking his last hope. Alone again in the darkened room, he felt exhaustion rising to claim him. Not the blissful surrender of needed sleep, but an inexorable sinking into renewed nightmare. As his eyes slipped closed, he could already hear the growl of the engine. Feel the worn fabric of the driver's seat cradling him like a lover. See the orange rays of the setting sun washing across an empty highway. 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. That's the trucker's shift. Outside, in the world that spun on without him, a new day dawned bright and oblivious. But for Richie, caught between life and death and madness, the night rolled on eternal, an endless stretch of black asphalt and blacker horrors.
No escape.
No solace, only the road, the stars, and the screaming. So Richie drove on and on and on into the gaping maw of the abyss.